What is good, good people? You are now listening to another episode of Since We Last Spoke with Danny Foxworth. I am your humble narrator, Danny Foxworth, and man, it's hard to believe that it's already been a week since I made my little weekend getaway up to the Queen City. That's basically like my second home at this point. But I'm gonna just take this episode just to give y'all a brief recap of how much fun I had up in the Queen City, man. It's always a treat. So I was there from Friday to basically from Friday to Monday. So when I got in Friday after, well, got in about 11 on Friday morning. My first stop every time I go to Charlotte, I gotta go to Beatty's Ford and hit up Archive. I love that place so much, just so much. It's just black, blackety, black, 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 black. Just so much art, so much nostalgia on the walls, and they serve great sandwiches. I love the ashwagandha tea. I swear by it. Just add a little bit of honey to it. Just chef's kiss. But it's all, I just always walk in there with a smile and I leave with a smile as well. So shout out to Sharice Terry. She's doing a great thing at Archive. And then after that, of course, I had to keep the blackness going. So the next place I went was made my way uptown and stopped at the Gantt Museum. And again, another one of my favorite stops in Charlotte. It's an African American museum in the Queen City. If you're ever in there, if you're ever in that city, if you're ever in Charlotte, make sure you go and check out the Harvey Gantt Museum. Harvey Gantt, for those that are unaware, he is actually from Charleston, South Carolina, but he is Charlotte's first black mayor. And he was also Clemson's first black student. So a little history lesson there. Then after I left the Gantt Museum, your boy got a little hungry again. So he made his way over to Cravin Caribbean for the first time. Heard a lot of good things about it, and all those good things lived up to the hype. I had the oxtail fried rice with the fried red snapper bites, and dog, dog. I'm them snapper bites and oxtail fried rice had me speechless, like straight up. I highly recommend Craving Caribbean. And then while I was at Craving Caribbean, I was thumbing through Twitter and I saw my guy Carolina Connect make a post about Bojangles making some Bowberry cookies now. If you know me, you know Bowberry biscuits are one of my favorite things in life. And the fact that they made the biscuit and turned it into a cookie form, I was like, huh, I think I'll try my hand at that. So as soon as I left Craving Caribbean, I went straight to Bojangles, and those things were just mind blowing. I mean, just soft, just warm, good and chewy, good, like serious blueberry factor. Like the blueberry to cookie ratio it was just perfectly balanced. I could not recommend it enough. So much so that if you follow me on IG, which I'm at Danny Foxworth 843, I did a 30-second snack review on those Bowberry cookies because they most certainly lived up to the hype. And then later on that afternoon, left Bojangles and then went checked into my hotel, just laid down and rested for a little bit. And then later on that night, went to the Charlotte Knights game because one of the biggest players, one of the top players in minor league baseball. Actually, he was the top player in minor league baseball, which was Jackson Holliday, who plays for the Norfolk Tides. They were in town for a weekend series against the Charlotte Knights, which their offense is just Tides offense is just crazy. And he didn't really do have a particularly like standout game, but it was cool to see him, in action still, being that he's the son of former major leaguer Matt Holliday. And it was cold as shit out there. I ain't gonna hold you. And I didn't stay very long, but nonetheless, that was a very eventful Friday. So then fast forward to Saturday, I enjoyed that experience at the Knights game so much that I decided to get up, and first thing I did was knock out a podcast from my baseball podcast, which is At the Plate with Danny Foxworth. And I talked about the game and other things pertaining to the world of Major League Baseball. Make sure you check that episode out. And after I knocked that episode out, like again, I always say, it's important to meet your internet friends in real life. And speaking of at the plate, I had a former guest, but his name is Todd. He's one half of one of my favorite podcasts, which is the Baseless Banter podcast, which is mainly sports and music. And they put out new episodes every Thursday. Make sure you check them out. But he lives in Charlotte, so I hit him up. I'm like, "Yo, you free for a couple of hours, man? Let's link up. Let's get something to eat." And he was like, "Bet." So we put the wheels in motion and drove down to South Park and met up with him at one of my other favorite Charlotte spots in Charlotte called the Cowfish. And man, it's always a treat when podcasters meet, man. Super cool dude. Man, it was cool hang, super good hang. We talked for about an hour just about sports and about his Raiders and my Panthers, and wrapped up the conversation having a healthy dialogue about battle rap. And it was real cool just hanging out, getting some sushi. I had the Parmesan truffle fries, which is my go-to at Cowfish. And after we left, I made my way down to Noda, which is the North Davidson area, and another one of my favorite places. You could tell by my backdrop if you're watching me on video. I'm a big art fan, and one of my other favorite places in Charlotte is a place right outside of Noda called the Charlotte Art League. Just showcases a bunch of local talent, and a lot of the pieces are up for sale there too. So, another place I highly recommend, Charlotte Art League. And they had murals on the side of the building, which I wasn't aware of previously. And so, just had a little fun, taking pictures in front of the murals and stuff. And then after I left there's another place, a vintage place, like not even a quarter of a mile right on the same road, called Locker Room Charlotte. Man, when I walked in there, it felt like it was 1989 all over again, and the Hornets just came into the league. They had so much Hornets paraphernalia from way, way back in the day. Like you had Kelly Trip, like the Kelly Tripucka bobbleheads. You had the Larry Johnson bobbleheads. You had Larry Johnson posters. I mean, they had like the '89 Hornets schedule plastered on the wall. They had a pair of Anthony Mason's game worn shoes. It was really like taking a trip in the yesteryear. And they sell a bunch of vintage jerseys, like Hornets and Panthers gear. Man, I cannot wait to get back there because there's quite a few things in there that I want to just spend my money on. So then later on that afternoon, well, after I left there, I went back to the hotel and took a quick nap. And then later that afternoon, I met up with my dog Donovan German, who was a guest on Since We Last Spoke. He's the rapper from Mount Pleasant who has cerebral palsy. He's currently living in Charlotte. I was like, yo, I'm in town, man. Let's link up. And we met up around 6 o'clock at another spot over on University called Harold's Chicken and Ice Bar. And it was always cool being in his presence. We got to chop it up about music, and he's got a upcoming album about to drop. And I think he's got a birthday coming up pretty soon too, if I'm not mistaken. If it hasn't happened already. If it has, Donovan, happy birthday, dog. And always a good time chopping it up with him. Again, meet your internet friends in real life. I cannot recommend it enough. And then after we departed, then I made my way back uptown just to check out the art murals. If you just walk around uptown, there's a certain section in the middle of uptown, in between these a building and a parking garage. I cannot remember the name of the alley, but it's just devoted to, like, from end to end. It's just different murals from local artists, and it is so damn cool to experience, especially at night. I wish we had that kind of art in Charleston. They just want to tear everything down and put up new shit instead of just. There's never enough murals. It's never enough murals in Charleston, but they always want to they're just so gung ho on more development. We don't need that shit. Anyway, after I did that, I called it a night, went back to my hotel, woke up the next morning, and No, stayed in a little bit later. So I get up and hit up my cousin Lanye because she's also in Charlotte. And it's always, again, it's always good catching up with family. So we went down to Noda and we met up at Growler's Poorhouse. That was actually my first time going there and had a great time. Just catching up, talking family stuff, reminiscing, having some good laughs about family members. And if you're there on Sundays, they do a dozen wings for $10. That's you can't beat that, especially in this economy. And I highly recommend the hot honey wings. I had those in the jerk wings too. Very, very good. And if you order fries, they just it's like comes in a big ass bowl. So it's listed as a side item, but it's almost like a main dish, the amount of fries that they serve you. And yeah, that was a great time. And then walked around Noda, bought a couple of vintage tees. It's a real super duper artsy section of Charlotte, which I'm always drawn to. And then later on that evening, I had the pleasure of going to the Charlotte Hornets game because if you don't know, I'm a diehard Oklahoma City Thunder fan. And they happened to be in town on Sunday, so I wasn't passing up that opportunity. And on top of that, I got to meet, well, not to meet, but I got to chop it up in real life with Rod and Karen from one of my favorite podcasts, The Black Guy Who Tips. And it's always a great time chopping it up with Rod and Karen. And we got into a really passionate discussion about women's basketball and what the men aren't doing that the women are doing that they could be taking note, that the men could be taking notes from. And just talking about podcast stuff. And then lo and behold, as we're talking, another guy walks up is Doug Branson, which is he's one of the co-hosts of another podcast that I listen to is the Locked On Hornets podcast. And it was super cool just seeing him see Rod, like seeing him and Rod interact. And then Rod introduces me to him. And I'd never seen him. I'd never seen who Doug Branson looked like. So I was like, oh shit, that's the dude I listen to at work all the time. I'm like, man, it's an honor to meet you. Man, that was awesome. And the game was fantastic. No, SGA and Jalen Williams sat out just for precautionary measures, but they managed to still eke out a win over the Hornets in the end. And after that, again, called it a night. And then Monday was checkout time. So checked out my hotel, made my way back uptown, and hit up two other museums, the Mint Museum and the Beckley Museum, that are basically right there on South Tryon, like basically two doors down from the Gantt Museum. And just getting lost in art museums. That's my jam right there. And then after I left there, killed some time at Concord Mills Mall. Stopped in the Nike store in there to see if they were any fresh kicks in there that tickle my fancy, and of course there weren't. It was just if you go in the Nike store in Concord Mills Mall, you walk in there, it's nothing but just wall to wall of those the Nike Monarch shoes. Yeah, not in my age bracket yet. So I left there and then made my way down 485 to the Charlotte Premium Outlets to see what was going on over there. And right around that time, I didn't realize it was in right around the same time where the eclipse was expected to occur. And in Charlotte, they were calling for 80% totality of the eclipse. So 311 rolls around, which was the time the eclipse was supposed to reach its full 80, well, the 80%. And it did get a little dark, just just slightly dark. I mean, it was noticeable. Temperature went down a little bit, but I mean, it was still cool. I ain't gonna hold you. It wasn't like the total eclipse we got down here in Charleston back in 2017, but still, it's still a cool experience. And then after that, I got in my car, and fueled up, and I headed back down 77, back down to Charleston, and well, back down to Long Ridge, I should say. And yeah, that was my that was my excursion to Charlotte. And I highly recommend Cravin Caribbean, and I highly recommend Archive, and I highly recommend getting the Bojangles Bowberry cookies. Straight up. I stamp them cookies. And that's going to do it for this episode of Since We Last Spoke. Make sure you like, download, and subscribe. Thank y'all so much. I just got a notification on Tuesday stating that this podcast and my baseball podcast, which is At the Plate with Danny Foxworth, combined have reached a total of 7,000 downloads. And I cannot thank y'all enough for your eyes and ears and you telling friends to tell their friends about my podcast. It truly makes me feel good from the bottom of my heart. Make sure you also subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is at Danny Foxworth 843. There you can find all the videos of all of the episodes for both of my podcasts. And again, thank y'all for listening. Thank y'all for subscribing. Thank y'all for downloading. And until next time, y'all be good. Peace.